Hi there, this is Lucy Kang. Before we start, I want to make a quick request to rate, follow, and subscribe to Making Contact wherever you're listening. Now, on to the show.
Like some of the proposed solutions that's coming from the grassroots level.
You're listening to Making Contact.
I'm Salima Hamirani, and this is Making Contact.
So welcome to tonight's event. Bienvenidos a todos.
So welcome to tonight's event. I want to let you know that we're on very special land. In this community, we have fighters, warriors working to get clean water.
You're listening to the voice of Susana de Anda. She's the co-founder and executive director of an organization called Community Water Center.
But more than anything, we have a community of love, compassion, and unity. Tonight, we're here to celebrate that.
Community Water Center is based in the San Joaquin Valley of California, which people sometimes call the Central Valley. And today, they're celebrating the Day of the Dead, specifically in the town of East Orosi. I was part of a group invited by Community Water Center to witness today's event because they wanted more people to know about what's going on with the water in East Orosi.
They want to give you some words of inspiration and also remember their ancestors that maybe aren't with us anymore, but are here in spirit.
On the Day of the Dead, you honor your ancestors who for one night are able to walk through the curtain of the afterlife to visit the people that they once loved. So from the stage, Susana calls out the names of the people that they've lost over the years.
I invite you to go and honor our ancestors at the altar we have behind us.
Los altares que tenemos al fondo. Teresa de Anda. Jesús Quevedo.
What's unique about this particular Day of the Dead event is that they're specifically honoring the activists that the town of East Orosi has lost during its long struggle for clean drinking water.
Jesús Quevedo. Jesús Quevedo. Teresa de Anda.
For about 20 years, this town and some of the neighboring ones have been living with water highly contaminated with nitrates.
For this, I want to call up the members who are here with me.
And over that time, many of the activists who once fought for the area to get clean water have passed away.
And the saddest thing about the situation is that many families are getting sick and dying. My wife died last year from cancer.
Mi señora murió el año pasado de cáncer, pero no es hereditario.
It's not hereditary. It's for some reason. It's because we've been drinking contaminated water for 11 years.
Estamos tomando agua contaminada por 11 años.
That's Cristobal Chavez. He's a member of Community Water Center.
Pues ahorita ya sabemos que no podemos usar esa agua para tomar ni para cocinar.
So now we know we can't use that water to drink or cook. And that's the sad situation. I lost my wife, and she's there on the altar table.
Y pues ni modo, está ahí en la mesa de los altares.
And his wife, like many of the names spoken out loud that day, was also an organizer. One of their focuses were laws that could change the water situation in the Central Valley.
Nora también fue una de las que fuimos a las marchas a Sacramento y
Nora was also one of those people who went to the marches in Sacramento so that Gavin Newsom could sign SB 200. And we are still in the fight, supporting Community Water Center.
Estamos en la lucha todavía apoyando a Community Water Center.
We're taking a look at East Orosi's long struggle for clean water. It's just one of hundreds of failing water systems across California, most of them in the Central Valley and in poor farm worker communities just like this one.
Clean water is a human right and it should never be a privilege. Do you agree? Clean water is a what? A human right, not a privilege. Clean water is what? A human right, not a privilege.
By looking at East Orosi's water struggle, we can begin to understand the roadblocks California has to face if it wants to provide clean, safe drinking water to all of its residents. Because this isn't just a story about policy. California can't just pass the right laws. it also has to ensure a way to implement them in the poorest of places where residents are already struggling with infrastructure and access and local governance is underfunded. The right laws might be sliding into place for East Orosi, but by themselves, they're just not enough. Stay tuned, all that and more coming up.
Teresa Dianda, Maria Elena Orozco, Maria Elena Orozco, Maria Elena Orozco. Yahoo! Gracias, dictadora.
Bueno, nosotros aquí, esta agua que está aquí.
This water here, well, it looks very clear, as you can see, but this water is full of nitrates.
Esta agua está llena de nitratos.
Our story today starts with Berta Diaz Ochoa, who's lived in East Orosi with her family for 24 years. She's a farm worker, like many in this small town in Tulare County.
La mayoría de la gente de la comunidad de East Orosi es de bajos recursos.
The majority of people in this community of East Orosi are low income. Also, a lot of elders live here. Almost 90% are farm workers.
Casi el 90% de personas son campesinos.
East Orosi is smack in the middle of dozens of sprawling orchards packed into dry, hard dirt, which doesn't even seem like it's capable of bearing fruit. In much of the Central Valley, water is earmarked for sustaining the crops, not the people.
Yo trabajo en la agricultura, del todo lo que es cítrico.
I work in agriculture, in the citrus industry. My work is with mandarins, oranges, lemons, and mineola, all the citrus.
Todo lo que es cítrico.
And Berta also has a daughter who works in the fields with her mother.
Ella siempre anda conmigo.
She's always with me.
Todos los días, ayudándole helping with the other workers, telling them don't leave the fruit on the ground, on the trees, don't leave your work tools behind. Que no dejen picos.
On one of my trips out to East Orosi, Berta had agreed to walk me around her house and her yard to show me what it's like living with water that's so polluted it could kill you, but so transparent it looks like glass.
Nos enteramos desde el 2000.
We found out in 2000, since 2000, but they say it's been a while since the water wasn't drinkable.
Otro tiempo más atrás que el agua no servía, pero digo, si había años atrás que no servía.
But for me, if it's been a while since the water has been polluted, I think it's irresponsible that they never told us until women who were pregnant here started to have miscarriages.
Abortar, a perder sus bebés, las señoras que estaban embarazadas aquí.
She's able to use the water from the tap for a few things.
Con esa agua contaminada nos bañamos.
With this contaminated water, we bathe. With this contaminated water, we wash our dishes. We do all the household chores with this contaminated water.
Los dientes.
Lavamos los dientes.
We brush our teeth with contaminated water because we don't have another solution.
Porque no nos queda otra solución.
But they definitely can't drink it. For drinking water, they depend on water bottles, which are delivered through a program funded by the California State Water Resources Control Board. And we're going to hear from them a little later on in the show about how they're funding water access. So, for example, if Berta wants to make a cup of coffee,
tenemos que agarrar el agua en botella. Estas son las botellas que nos traen a nosotros.
We have to bring these water bottles in. These are the bottles that they deliver to us. These are 5-gallon bottles. They leave us only 5 bottles of 5 gallons.
5 botellas de 5 galones.
Which means that each household receives 25 gallons of water every other week.
Ahora nos quedan... Aquí las tengo por fuera.
Now we have left... I have them outside.
And you could have 2 people in your house or 10, but you still receive the same ration.
Ahorita nomás tengo... Son 2 botellas que me quedan.
Right now, I have 2 bottles left.
Me van a traer el agua.
They're going to bring me water. They're going to deliver water on the 8th of November.
Hasta el día 8 de noviembre.
I spoke with Berta on November 3rd, and maybe 5 days doesn't seem like a long time when she has 2 bottles left, But as an experiment, if you're listening at home, fill up a 5-gallon container one day and slowly use it for all of your drinking needs. I tried this after I visited Berta, and it lasted me a little over half a day. And I'm just one person, not an entire family. Berta, remember, also works outside in the fields under the sun, so she needs a lot more water than I do on a normal day.
Cuando hace calor se consume tan solo por persona.
And when it's hot, for only one person, we need 6 to 8 bottles of water per day.
Yes, a 8 botellas de agua por día.
The stories that I hear from local residents about the realities of living off of bottled water is just the trade-offs that they have to make every day between using that water to rinse their produce, or should they use it to drink with, or should, it's sort of like a daily rationing practice.
That's Janaki Anaga. She's a lawyer and the director of advocacy with Community Water Center. We heard from their executive director during the Day of the Dead event. Community Water Center helps towns in the San Joaquin Valley organize for clean drinking water. So the valley has a lot of pollutants in the water, but the main problem in East Orosi is that nitrate Berta Diaz was talking about.
And that's a result of local agriculture like dairies and synthetic fertilizer that runs off of the local orchards, concentrating in drinking water sources.
Nitrate is a chemical that helps boost the amount of nitrogen available to plants, which helps them to create protein. Since there's a limited amount a plant can usually absorb, normally there's a limit to how fast they can grow and even where they can grow. Artificial fertilizers, however, accelerate plant growth by flooding them with nitrogen in a water-soluble form called nitrate. It can force plants to grow in soil that's not really suited for them, and it's also not good for humans to consume.
Nitrate is an invisible and scentless compound that in certain quantities can result in inhibiting oxygen moving through your body. So in very small children and infants, this can be fatal. In adults, and particularly among pregnant women and people who are immune compromised, it's incredibly detrimental. And it also is connected to a higher risk of cancer.
There weren't any medical studies on East Orosi that I could find, and it's also difficult to pinpoint water as the cause of many of the diseases present in the Central Valley. The area has been plagued by environmental racism for decades, so it's hard to know if it's the refineries or heavy industry or the smog or the fertilizers. But a 2001 study found that low-income communities with high levels of nitrate in the water had twice the incidence of thyroid cancer. And it's not just nitrate that small towns in the Central Valley have to worry about. Depending on their location, there are a slew of chemicals they'll have to contend with. There's problems with arsenic, which occurs naturally, but also leaches into the groundwater as runoff from industrial and agricultural sources. There's hexavalent chromium, natural but also industrial runoff, which is highly carcinogenic, and 1,2,3-TCP, which is a chemical that used to be used in pest control that is now banned, but lingers in the groundwater in agricultural towns. It's also carcinogenic and damages the liver. A study in 2019 by the Environmental Working Group discovered that drinking the tap water in California could contribute to 15,500 cases of cancer in the state. And most of that unsafe water is concentrated in the Central Valley. It's a catch-22 for most of its residents. Many people work in the very industries that are slowly killing them, like Berta and her neighbors.
Hay niños que están muriendo. Hay personas de todas las edades que están muriendo por todos los químicos.
There are people of all ages dying because of the chemicals that they're releasing. And we don't have any other solution other than to go to work in the fields every day.
No más de que ir a trabajar al campo.
I asked Berta if she thought that the big agricultural companies should pay to clean up the water in the Central Valley, since they're the ones that polluted it in the first place.
Deberían, pero yo sé que no lo van a hacer.
They should, but I know they're not going to. Why? Because that's how they make money. And to them, we're only farm workers. In reality, as a farm worker here, we feel as if the only thing that's important is that we harvest the crops.
Uno como campesino siente uno que a ellos lo único que les importa es que uno saque la cosecha.
She feels like they don't have much of a choice. They're immigrants, and as far as their work goes, they're replaceable.
Quizás cuando ya estemos enfermos.
Maybe once we're sick, they will no longer need us because they claim there will always be more workers.
Hacemos falta porque dicen van a venir otros.
And it's not just the drinking water that Berta is struggling with.
Sí, hemos tenido muchos problemas.
We've had a lot of problems with the sanitation.
Aquí en esta área de aquí así está el pozo de la fosa séptica.
Here in this area is the septic tank. We have to open it from here up to this part.
Hasta acá.
In big cities, we don't think much about the water that comes out of our taps or the water we flush down the toilet. They're somehow related, but we don't know how or who's in charge. For Berta, living in this small town, the sanitation system and the drinking water are linked, and she's had a lot of problems with sludge coming back up through the sewage pipes and into her house and yard.
En el baño, en la cocina, en el toilet.
In the bathroom, in the kitchen, in the toilet, everything. And it stinks.
Y huele.
Part of the problem is that the people who are supposed to service the sanitation in this area often just don't do it.
We hear dozens of residents come and tell us they've never had their septic tank pumped, even despite calling and trying to get through, that they have had to do it themselves and pay. There have also been several instances where the infrastructure has failed due to poor operation and maintenance, and sewage has backed up into people's homes, into their bathtubs and their sinks, and into their backyards, and this has happened on a couple of occasions.
Yo creo esto se debería de ser viral.
I believe that this should be viral because it's a very critical situation, what we're living with here in this community. And like I said, it's a beautiful community, very peaceful. But even though it's peaceful, we can also see the seriousness of the situation with our water.
Pero así como está de pacífica, también podemos ver la gravedad que hay con nuestra agua. Y
we also deserve a better life, a dignified one, like all human beings.
Dignamente, como todos los seres humanos.
There's a common issue across the Central Valley that Berta pointed out to me. The city next to East Orosi is called Orosi, and it does have clean water. Berta told me she could point to the boundary between the two towns right from her house.
Para allá, para el pueblo. Una milla de East Orosi a Orosi.
1 mile of difference, yet Orosi has water and East Orosi doesn't. They're both small towns with farm workers, both surrounded by agriculture. So why does one town have clean water and the next town over doesn't? Well, to understand, we need to learn a little bit more about California geology and how poverty plays into who gets water and who doesn't. Stay tuned, there's a lot more coming up.
We're just jumping in to remind you that you're listening to Making Contact. If you like today's show and you want more information, you can find us online at radioproject.org. And now, back to today's show.
Welcome back to Making Contact. If you're just joining us, we're talking about water access in East Orosi, a small town in the San Joaquin Valley of California. And in the first half, we visited the house of Berta Diaz Ochoa to see what it was like to live without clean drinking water and to have sewage back up through the pipes and into your house. And so to start us off in the second half, I wanted to know why some towns in California are so polluted while others are not. And for that, I visited a nonprofit called Self-Help Enterprises at their offices in Visalia.
So how was the drive?
It was long.
Yeah, I know.
There was a little bit of traffic, but it was mostly
just the worst.
I learned about Self-Help Enterprises because they're actually in charge of delivering those 5-gallon jugs of water to people like Berta in East Orosi. But that's not the only thing that they do. Here's Jessie Snyder, their Director of Community Development.
We were founded in 1965. We serve the San Joaquin Valley, which is 9 counties, and the foothills and surrounding areas in those counties.
So that includes Tulare County and towns suffering from polluted water like Cutler, Early Mart, Seville, Sultana, and East Orosi. Self-Help Enterprises didn't start out working on water.
We do a lot of affordable housing. We started off building houses and quickly realized that infrastructure is a really critical part of a healthy community. So we started working in the 70s to help secure that.
The organization uses money from the state of California to help small communities build out water infrastructure by guiding them through project management and complex grant procedures for things like pipes, treatment, and wells. And when it comes to clean water, the most critical piece of infrastructure is a productive well. But it's almost impossible to know what kind of water you have until you break ground. Here's Jessie.
Aquifers are not neat, tidy layer cakes. They are messy. There's all these different things going on that we literally cannot see, right? Like, we don't have ground penetrating vision.
A lot of communities on the coast of California get their water from reservoirs and snowmelt. Those are easy to track at a glance because they're above ground. But the Central Valley has to rely on aquifers, which is water held in rocks deep underground.
So we don't know exactly where plumes of contamination are, and we don't know where they might go over time. So every time we drill a well, I have to say, it's a little bit of a crapshoot. You really don't know what you're going to get until you get it.
East Orosi isn't totally unique in this way. There are about 400 failing water systems in California, almost all of them in poor, rural communities. And as climate change increases drought, and agriculture continues to pull from those ancient aquifers underneath the state and continues to pollute, those systems become more vulnerable.
And when you are a small, disadvantaged community that's maybe, 2-3 acres in size, those 2-3 acres are what you've got to work with.
In a bigger, richer town, if you dig a well and it's polluted, you can try digging another one a few miles away, hoping that you'll find clean water. Then you can ship that clean water in, mix it with the polluted water, and lower the overall concentration of something like nitrate.
Because it's mostly about concentration.
Because it's mostly about concentration, exactly. And we have different contaminant levels in different sources, right? So there might be a well over, on the east side of town that's high in nitrates, but low in arsenic. Maybe there's a well on the other side of town that is higher in arsenic, but low in nitrates. When you bring those together, if you blend them strategically and scientifically, you can actually come out with a product that meets both standards.
But if you're a poor, small, unincorporated town,
you're not going to be able to drill a well 20 miles away and pipe that water in. That's not how it works when you're a small water system. That might be how it works in really big federal and statewide projects, but it does not work that way when you're a small water system. You're stuck with what you've got under your feet.
East Orosi, for example, has 2 wells, and they're both contaminated. In the summer, they're almost completely dry, and the concentration of chemicals reaches incredibly dangerous levels. And technically, even if they can't dig a new well very far away, they could try to dig deeper to access potentially cleaner water lower in the aquifer, but that's also not an option.
And I'm guessing drilling a well is pretty expensive.
Absolutely it is. So a new public drinking water well, is easily north of $1 million these days. 1.2 million feels like a recent cost estimate I've seen. But if you think about a well having useful life of, let's say, 30 to 40 years, 40 years is a pretty good assumption, and you try to spread that $1 million over 30, 40, 50 customers over 40 years, forget it. That right there, you're done. That well is unaffordable.
This is a reason that small, poor, rural communities really suffer so much more from a lack of clean drinking water. They just don't have the tax base to create new infrastructure. They can't ship clean water in, they can't dig deeper in search of it. And it's not just water. East Orosi is having sewage problems, as we mentioned. It also doesn't have sidewalks in some places. All of the street lamps don't function. It just doesn't have the money.
So, if you drill and you find nitrate, well, you might just be stuck with that until another 100 years goes by and you can save up enough money for a new well, or you access public funding to drill it.
And that's actually why the situation in East Orosi is changing, because now there is public funding available. In 2012, California declared water access a human right. It was the first state in the nation to do so, and is actually setting aside funds to fix its failing water systems in small towns where water access is the most dire. And there were a few new laws, but the primary one is called SAFER, or SB 200, which stands for Safe and Affordable Funding for Equity and Resilience. It was an important victory for many of the East Orosi organizers who often went to Sacramento to lobby for it. SAFER sets aside $130 million per year through 2030 just for water.
One of the things that was really unique about SAFER, it does pay for infrastructure, so pipes in the ground, wells, treatment plants.
And with these new funds, California has decided that there's an easy solution to East Orosi's water issues. A study in 2018 pointed out that 80% of the communities that don't have water are less than 1 mile away from communities that do have water. That's the case for East Orosi.
Well, so one of the primary tools we have, and this is one of the tools that we're using in the case of East Orosi, is what we call consolidation, which means joining two water systems together.
That's Andrew Altavote, Assistant Deputy Director of the State Water Resources Control Board, which is the government entity helping fund water delivery to East Orosi. The board has facilitated over 100 consolidations across California. Consolidating water systems can mean a lot of things, combining billing or administration, for example.
And then in this case, what we would call physical consolidation, where you're actually connecting pipes together.
The state plans to pay for or reimburse all of the expenses involved in laying new pipes, digging new wells, connecting all of the infrastructure between the two towns. It just has to get the town of Orosi to agree.
And in most cases, most of our consolidations are voluntary.
The state can also allow bigger administrative systems to take over smaller ones to help with things like billing and bureaucracy while the consolidation is taking place. That's also been ordered for East Orosi.
So in this case, Tulare County is the administrator. So we're paying Tulare County to help to run the East Orosi system and to bring them into the consolidation with Orosi.
All of this means that East Orosi is finally, after 20 long years, on the verge of being able to turn on their taps and drink water flowing out of it without fear of getting cancer. The next time I went back to East Orosi for the second Day of the Dead event, the community was celebrating its newfound victory. We're back in East Orosi early on a November night, and I watch a young boy place marigolds on the base of an altar the community has built near the front of the gathering. It's a chilly night, but it's a respite from the heat I experienced when I visited in the summer.
This year we kept it a little bit more low-key. We thought we could just do, more information, still do a remembrance, and just share bread and chocolate, hot chocolate with the residents.
Janaki Anaga from the Community Water Center updates the residents on the recent win.
Muchos de ustedes saben que estamos aquí cerca a la ciudad de Orosi o el distrito de Orosi.
Many of you know that we are here close to the city of Orosi or the district of Orosi. And at the end of 2026, we're going to connect the pipes from here in East Orosi to Orosi.
De aquí de East Orosi a Orosi.
But this is not the end of the story for East Orosi. In the next episode, why is East Orosi's water solution taking so long, even with the proposed consolidation and available state funds? It's because Orosi and East Orosi are unincorporated towns, and their water is overseen by boards or what's called a utility district. They're supposed to advocate for their communities, fight for clean water, make sure septic tanks get cleaned, but in a very counterintuitive way, this type of democratic local governance via utility districts has actually been a huge barrier to California implementing water equity. You can find out more next week, and until then, visit us online at radioproject.org. I'm Salima Hamirani, and thanks for listening to Making Contact.